Welcome to Law and the Family. Today, what we want to discuss is pretty much the impact of voting. You know, with the election right down the road, a lot of times you hear people say that I'm not going to vote for whatever reason. And I started this movement, Turn Texas Blue. And the reason I organized it is because I started looking at the climate that we're living in today. And what you see in that climate is you have so many crimes where you have the police brutality, you have judges doing things that are outright illegal. You have situations where the laws that we are under or subject to, sometimes they're not fair, not just. And we're going to talk about those laws and the impact of those laws. But most importantly, what we want to talk about today is why it's important to vote. Why that everybody out there, every person in the community should make it their absolute duty to go out and vote. And if we can do that and we can all rally together and we can start voting, we can change the world and we can impact those laws that we don't like, we feel that they're unjust. We can get people out of offices that are unfair or that don't agree with our philosophy of treating people with dignity and respect and being just. So to start off today, what we're going to do is this: we're a family of lawyers, and I'm sure you've probably met a lot of us. It's five. I have my husband, Lonnie, my daughter, Tiiva, my other daughter, Tiara, and we have a son, Antoine, and today is his wife's birthday, so he's not with us. With that, I want to start off with each one of them introducing themselves and why it's actually essential that we vote.
Well, my name is Lonnie Johnson, and I guess voting has always been a really big issue to me and the need to vote. But fortunately, I had an opportunity to spend 5 years working in D.C. as a lobbyist. And I got to spend time with people like John Lewis and to listen to him talk about the things they went through back in the 60s, fighting to get us the right to vote, us as a people, the right to vote. It's almost, in my view, it's an obligation. Just when you think of the tears, the blood, the suffering that those folks went through to enable us to vote, then it's a no-brainer. We have to vote for those reasons, our obligations. But on top of that, I think there is the fundamental issue that voting plays such a big part on what we do, how we live our daily lives. The people in charge of our jail system, in charge of our court system, in charge of public policy in general, are people that are elected by we the people. And when we the people choose to not vote, and you have 35% of the people voting, and the 65% that sit back and choose not to vote, they're in essence saying, I'm turning over my destiny, control of my fate, my future, to the few people who choose to go out and vote. And to me, that just seems asinine. Tiago?
I think my reasons for everybody needing to vote are just the most basic reason. We all complain about the state of our nation. We complain about the state of affairs here, even locally in Harris County. We look at the news and we're outraged because of crime, and we're outraged because of the way the people are treated, but we don't vote. In order to have a direct impact on the way that all of those things shape out, whether it be if you're upset about the crime rate and what's going on and how people are prosecuted, you need to vote for the DA, you need to vote for the sheriff in order to make sure that you get somebody who's more in line with handling the problems and not just pushing them down the road, and handling the problems in a manner that respects the values that we all want and enjoy. If you have a problem with the way that people are treated when they get to the courtrooms, you gotta vote. Everything that we complain about, it's solved. Well, not everything. A lot of things that we complain about are solved by getting out there and voting. And if we got out in the numbers and voted our hearts and our issues and our positions, we wouldn't have to stand on the street corners and yell about them. Those problems would be redressed. But you can't redress any of those problems sitting and looking at a TV and talking about them. The only way that you get action or things to move in your direction is to get out and vote and put people in office that have your values, your interests, at heart and that matters to them, and you don't do that by not voting.
I think for me, of course, I think voting is important because of my history. I grew up with parents who stressed the emphasized voting. And then when I became a lawyer and I started to see how judges were elected, it became very real how important it was to vote for the judges that essentially, I'm a family law attorney, and they determine, which parent the children go to. They determine whether or not the state is going to take conservatorship of children. These are just regular judges, and it's important to make sure that these judges are making solid decisions, and the only way is, to do your research and to vote. I think for this presidential election, it's different for me because I do take voting seriously. I think of it more of like an endorsement. I think if I'm going to put my name behind a candidate, whether it be for a judge or for president, it has to be somebody that I really believe in wholeheartedly. Now, granted, you're not going to believe in everything, but fundamentally, I want to really stand behind the candidate that I vote for. And this election is different for me because I can't honestly say that I stand behind either one of them wholeheartedly. But I don't know if we're to get into who we're voting for. I mean,
You can say whatever you want to say.
I'm voting for Hillary Clinton, not necessarily because I'm 100% behind her, but I fear Donald Trump. I think we're going to be in some serious trouble if he becomes the president. So now I'm not endorsing Hillary Clinton, but I just feel like a vote for Hillary is a vote against Donald, and that's the only reason why I'm voting for her.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We talked about, and I want to make sure we bring the point of tie the voting into things that are directly impacting our community. And, just thinking about this show, I started thinking about the things we hear about all the time. One is the crack versus powder cocaine. Before the I think it was the Fair Sentencing Act, they had crack was 100-1. It was disproportionate for, sentencing. And then they improved it, so to speak, and it's 18-1. But if you look at the statistics, only 4% of the population uses crack cocaine, and 12% of the population, which are usually not minorities, are using the powder cocaine. Nevertheless, that 4% make up more of the population in jails than that 12%, even with those statistics. And you ask why. And when I started off, we talked about discrimination, and far too often you hear people say, well, they're just playing the race card. And I'm of the belief that, how people do say where there's smoke, there's often fire. And I look back, and I just looked here recently at the case where you had the young man out of California that sexually assaulted the young lady, and he gets 6 months. And then you get an athlete that's Vanderbilt. He sexually assaulted an unconscious person, same thing, and he gets 15 years. The one happens to be 15 years is the minority, and then the one that got the 6 years was the Caucasian.
6 months.
6 months, was the 6 month Caucasian. But even if you dig down further, when you read the stories, one of them, the guy that was black, the story said for rape. Same conduct, but the guy that was Caucasian, they said, he was there for sexually assaulting. And that is, to me, is that subtleness that you don't look at, that paints those pictures. But this is not about Caucasian versus minority. What is about, more or less, is our system of justice and our community, the reason we have to get out and vote. Even going down to the Kids for Cash scandal, where you had judges in the United States, where it was 2 in particular that got convicted, where because they have they're getting rid of the system, but they had these private prisons. They still exist. And the judges, in order to get kickbacks, they were given harsher sentences so these people could stay in these private prisons longer, and the private prisons were getting all this money, and judges $1 million in kickbacks, to send our kids, give them harsher sentences. And I'm sure some of them probably on little evidence, if no evidence. Then I even went back and I started thinking about little things like, for instance, it's a steakhouse case. And this is one in Texas. And the reason it gets to me is because you had a lawyer that got 10 years, he created some felonies, and he got 10 years in a sentence, and they probated the 10 years, and then the judge only required him to stay 120 days in jail. The prosecutor that was the defense attorney that was representing him went and said, because my client owns a steakhouse and he needs to take care of his family, this would be, a punishment to make it where he can't take care of his family. So I think that if we could give him time off during the day to go run his restaurant, come back at night, but let's give him the time to run the restaurant so he doesn't lose his livelihood. And I think of all of the people of color that's lined up in prisons today, the livelihood, they could care less. They don't make a lot of provisions a lot of the times. And just going back to that, I thought about, had to go look it up. Definitely wasn't going to be someone of color, and that's why I say that as a community, you got to get out and vote because voting makes a difference. It is so sad to know, just looking at statistics, that in the last primary election, just 2016 in March, out of 14 million people that are registered to vote, for Democrats, only 10% showed up to vote, and for Republicans, 19% showed up to vote. And I want to talk to you guys today, just discussing, why do you think it is that we don't vote? What happens?
I don't know why. I do know there are a lot of complaints, and as Tiava said, a lot of times folks are complaining, but they're not doing the voting to deal with some of those issues. People talk about how red Texas is. Well, you look back over from 2000, and the Texas I looked at was 2000 up to 2012. Every year, the number of Republicans voting the percentage of Republicans voting in that election was better than the national average. The percentage of Democrats voting was far less than the national average. So if Democrats only voted at the rate of the national average, Texas would not be red, would not be a red state. And you look at some of the problems that people say, I hear so often people saying, well, why does it matter to me? They're going to do what they're going to do. Well, that's just not, it makes no sense. One of the favorite lines I've heard President Obama say is, when he says something and people boo, he said, don't boo, vote. There was a time when we dealt with our problems by marching. And that was how we dealt with the issues. That's all we could do. We couldn't vote, so we marched. A lot of things you don't have to march about now, because you can vote about it, and you can vote people out of office. The 2014 election in Harris County, there are, if you look at the number of eligible voters, I'll go with just registered voters, a little over 2 million registered voters in Harris County at the 2014 election. The problem is, out of the 2 million, a little over 2 million that are registered to vote, you had a 35% voter turnout. So 600 and some thousand people actually voted. Now, you look at the number of black voters in Harris County. Of registered voters, you had right at 300,000. So if you had the high turnout, if you had 100% turnout of black registered voters, you'd have been close to 50% of the votes cast. And so, and by far, I am not saying that if you have a black judge, it's going to necessarily mean that it's going to be better for you. But it's important to look at diversity on the bench. It's also important to look at the judges who are running and look at their qualifications, see what their principles are, how they align themselves, what things do they believe that you believe. Every black judge is not going to be in my favor. Number one judge for me that I would say is not in my favor is Clarence Thomas. I mean, we just had a case recently, a Supreme Court case, Foster versus Chapman, where Clarence Thomas, a black man from Georgia, looked at a case where there was evidence that 30 years ago, when this man was convicted, that the prosecutor used race to exclude black folks from the jury. A violation of the law. Supreme Court case, the Batson case, says you cannot use race to exclude someone from the jury. There was clear evidence that they used race to exclude them from the jury. And as you might remember, because the Senate has not confirmed Supreme Court Justice number 9, there are only 8 justices on the Supreme Court. 7 of those justices voted to say that this is in violation of Batson and it has to be overturned. There was one dissenting judge that said, no, I don't see that. It should not be overturned. And that was Clarence Thomas, a black man from Georgia dealing with another black man from Georgia. So I don't buy into the fact that you're a black judge, you're going to be good for me, or just because you're a Democratic judge, you're going to be good for me. I want to look at what you stand for. And if the principles that you stand for are things that I think are fair and just, then yes, that's who I want to vote for. And that's what people have to do. They have to start looking at who is most aligned with what I believe. Tierra and I differ on a lot of things. We all differ. I strongly support Hillary Clinton because I know who she is. And I've seen her in environments where there were no cameras looking at her. And, there was a lot of national attention last weekend that Donald Trump went to a black church. And he said, I learned a lot. This is the first time I've been here. 70 years old and he's never been to a black church. And he said, well, Hillary wasn't here today. She's been in black churches all her life. And she's been working on things that help our communities all her life. I understand the email scandal. And yes, she should not have used that email, the private server. Yeah, get over it. Because the email scandal is not something that impacts my daily life. There's not been not one showing where her email was hacked, where any secrets got out. I understand the Clinton Global Foundation. But, when you stop and look at it, the whole scandal, what Donald Trump is calling pay for play, is a situation where people who gave to the Clinton Foundation got meetings with the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Never any evidence that she did anything for them, that they got a meeting. Now let's look at the other side of the ledger. Donald Trump, he has, in Florida, they're investigating him. The Attorney General came out and said, or her office said, we're looking at Trump University as to whether that is defrauding the people of the state of Florida, as to whether we're going to join in that lawsuit. 4 days later, the Trump Foundation gives $25,000 to her campaign, or to the group supporting her reelection. And then the investigation goes away. And then later he has a fundraiser for her at his Mar-a-Lago hotel. Now, currently, when he has a fundraiser there, he charges his campaign $140,000 to have a fundraiser there. For her event, he charged $5,000. And not my words, but his words. He said, I give to politicians on both sides, and you can look it up. His specific words are, and yes, I give to them, and 2 or 3 years later, when I need something, they're going to be there for me. If that's not pay for play, I don't know what is. So there are so many things that I find troubling about Trump. I could not support him if no one else was running. But I strongly believe in Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and let me ask another thing. As far as, elected officials, here in Harris County, judges, if you go back to the last election, pretty much every minor or Democratic person that ran for judge got wiped out. You had a handful of the state, but let's talk about that. What is the impact of that when something like that happens?
I can say in the family law arena, there is one specific election that broke my heart. There was Judge Hellam's associate for a long time, Mika Walker. She was solid. She came under Judge Hellam's, and she knew her law. She was a Republican. She's a black lady, but she was a Republican. She was running against another attorney. I want to say he had only been licensed for 6 years, and he won. And so far, he hasn't done anything that I would say was just terrible. But as far as how uniform he is in his decision making, it's just not the same. And we actually had someone who would have done a very good job. But it goes back to a lot of times who you know and how much money you have behind you. And sometimes that affects the outcome of, a lot of times that affects the outcomes of elections. I did want to talk about the situation you were mentioning with Clarence Thomas. I think that on the Supreme Court level, it becomes even more important because then you're dealing with, I mean, granted, family law cases, they matter. Criminal law cases, they matter. But when you're dealing with your constitutional rights, with your civil liberties, that really, really matters, and it matters all across the board. I mean, across the United States. I think that when whether you agree with the Constitution or not, it does give you a body of obligations and protections that you can pretty much rely on. And when you have cases like that where he essentially said, you know, forget what the Constitution says, this is what I believe, that's a problem. He did that again this summer with the what was the case? It was Utah versus, oh gosh, Strife, I want to say was it, but essentially the Supreme Court in another 5-3 decision with the 8 justices determined that you could stop. The police can now stop you without any type of probable cause, take your ID. If you have even a traffic warrant, traffic ticket, they can arrest you. And now they can search everything. They can do whatever they want. Not because you've done anything wrong. You can just be walking down the street. And typically, that wasn't the case. The Constitution protects us from that. I mean, that's an unlawful search. And Clarence Thomas he wrote for the majority and said, yeah, that was unlawful, but it's still okay because he had a traffic ticket, a warrant, I mean, for a traffic violation. But I mean, you wouldn't have known he had that warrant had you not been stopping him on a whim. And my fear is that he was white, but now it makes it, and that's what Justice Sotomayor was talking about in her dissenting opinion. Like, you just open the floodgates for police to profile again. I just wanted to see if you have warrants and let you have a warrant. It can be old, if there's any type of warrant, and you can even be mistaken about that warrant. If you get them and you determine that there's something that after you search their property, you determine there's something illegal, they have a record that they have to deal with. All because we have Supreme Court justices who don't even rely on the Constitution that they've been elected. I mean, they've been elected to uphold.
Well, a bigger issue, I think, with that case, even, I mean, you know, one of the protections that you have in the Constitution is the unlawful stops and searches and seizures.
Right.
In the past, in order for them to stop you, they had to have probable cause. With this opinion, they don't have to have a probable cause anymore. And that's what's so crucial about it, because we have a problem now with, you know, far too many black and brown folks being stopped for no reason. And so now when the law says to them, you can stop them without probable cause, my big fear is folks are going to be sitting there saying, you know, I'm tired of you stopping me. Why are you stopping me? Why are you consistently stopping me? I have done nothing wrong. And you're going to have altercations that will come up out of frustration just because they've been stopped. The ones with warrants, okay, they have a warrant. But I'm talking about the ones who have no warrant. They've done absolutely nothing wrong. They're going to be frustrated to continuously being stopped for no reason, and this case allows them to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's a timely subject right now, simply because if you think about the Supreme Court is up, you know, up for, or, you know, open, and that can change the dynamics. Getting out to vote this time is more crucial than ever. T.I., but you're quiet over there.
I think it still comes back to what I said originally. Like, if you have a problem with the way something is, think of what is the root of my problem, how do I fix it? Generally, you fix it by voting. If I have a problem with the way that my taxes, the tax situation, I get to vote on that. If I have a problem with the way that the kids are treated in court by the different judges, I get a vote on that. If I have a problem with the way that the kids in the community are profiled by the sheriff, guess what I also get to vote on? Who the sheriff is. I get to make those decisions, but everybody takes this, not everybody. People take an approach of, it doesn't matter, it's just my vote. Well, if you really feel like it's just your vote, then make it more than just your vote. When you go out to vote, don't have just you. Make sure you take your kids. Make sure you take your friends. take a group, because we're acting like we have problems, that the only solution is we stand out in the quarter and one day freedom will come. But you pass up on your freedom every time you don't march your little self into the voting box. If I know based on the numbers, if we got to the community, if the community came out at the same rate they come out to a Beyonce concert, guess what? Our problems we handle right now. And when you don't vote, it's just essentially saying, I really don't care for the problem we handle right now because I can't get up and vote. We can vote. There are people that register everywhere. We register in churches. We register in churches, we register at beauty shops, barber shops, we register Little League games, we register at the mall, we register at the jail. Half of Houston is registered. But the question is, who comes out to vote? And everybody sits and complains about the issues. How many times have you felt like, I don't want to say anything against the officers because, you know, these people patrol my neighborhood? Well, if you really feel like I'd want to do it anonymously, get out there and vote. And y'all vote as a block. That means you and your friends, you get out and you go to vote. You don't have to wait for freedom to one day come. It's not that complicated. November 8th, we have an election. If you are tired of the way that things are now, stop talking about it. Get up, get out, get your friends, and vote. The way the numbers are set up, because we talk about the way things are set up all the time, the way the numbers are set up, it's clear. Based upon the numbers, we turn it anytime we decide to go to the polls. But despite this knowledge that based on the numbers, if I hear one more time, Texas is just a red state and it's just a wasted vote. But what are the demographics on Harris County? What demographically is Harris County and what is demographically Fort Bend County? Well, those aren't red counties. Those are blue counties. The only problem is you get so disenfranchised by the way things are, or they seem to be, you give up your win without even going in for the fight. And I think that's just really stupid. So yes, do we have a number of judges that need to go? We do. We do. There are some Republican judges, if I'm being honest, that need to stay. And like, I am one of those people that I'm gonna look at the whole picture. I will say I'll name Judge Guinea. Judge Guinea is a Republican. She is. But I can confidently say that we might not agree on every decision. We just won't. But she genuinely tries to do not only what's best for her in her interest and what looks good in the news. At the end of the day, she's guided by what is going to benefit the community. And not just the community I live in, what is going to benefit my community as a whole. We need to seek out people. For our lawyers, we are dropping the ball. If you know when a judge is not a good judge, you got to tell more people than the other attorneys that you're in court with. You got to make sure that your social circle knows it. Yes, I do send out a list of people that I think that we should vote for every single time an election comes up. I want them to know who the good judges are, in my opinion. I want them to know who the bad judges are, in my opinion.
Yeah, what can we do more on that ground? And I say that because I'm a lawyer. I don't know all the judges. I try my best to learn, but I think as a community, we got to make some more concerted efforts to actually inform our people because, you know, we talk about getting more minority judges. What are some of the benefits? You know, I see the benefits as not that if you get a minority judge, it means that your person is not going to get a sentence, that they can do whatever, but it means that they're usually going to get a fair shot, that they're going to get somebody that understands their perspective. And Tierra, I remember one thing you were talking about one time at Fort Bend where you had that case and you had gotten somebody off and you were standing in the line and the prosecutor told you, hey, don't stand in line, why don't you just plead for a day? Do you remember that? And I bring that up because so many of our kids don't understand the fact that pleading for the day, just for one day, they got a record. And that same day she talked about all the kids that were there standing in line that weren't represented by a lawyer, taking a plea for a few days, not understanding that those prosecutors sometimes are not concerned about justice, they're concerned about a judgeship. relationship. They're concerned about getting a record or getting a plea so they can say, I got this many pleas. So we got to inform our community a little better to let them know what's out there. And especially, families where they, sometimes they don't feel like they have the money to pay for that lawyer, but they need to do everything on the front end a lot of times, because once they get in the system or they're convicted, to get them out, it's going to take years, and sometimes it's going to take a battle, and sometimes it's not even going to happen. But, what are some things and solutions that we can offer the community that we can do better to make sure people are informed, that they know the laws?
I think there are a couple of programs out there. I know the Houston Lawyers Association, you can call them, and they have volunteer lawyers, and I don't know the hours, but I know that they will answer your phone calls, and they'll at least give you broad guidance to point you in the right direction. And that I've heard has been very helpful to some people. I think that a lot of it just comes down to if you find yourself in any type of situation, whether it be a custody matter or a criminal matter, ask for help. There are plenty of lawyers, there are plenty of resources available, even the law library, that will, if nothing else, point you in the right direction so you're not in a situation where you're taking a plea or you're surrendering custody of your child on a basis that you think is temporary and it's just not. There are just so many nuances and caveats to different laws that, it's hard to say, oh, well, this is the solution, but seek help. If you have a problem, as soon as you have the problem, seek help. Don't wait, seek help.
I see that we have some calls, and let's take a call right now before just to find out what the audience, what are your questions out there? Must be technical difficulty. We see the line that has calls. Caller, you have a question?
Okay, well, while the caller situation gets together, I think there are some practical steps that we can take. One of the things is we have to get back in our communities, because it's nice to say, reach out and call somebody, but what happens when you know no one to call? We've gotten so far removed, like we grow up and we get out. We got to stop growing up and getting out.
Well, isn't a church one of the things that people usually go to as a refuge, so to speak?
But everybody doesn't do that anymore. I think that we need to get back, and when I say get back, need to get back to the lowest common denominator. And that sometimes means, as an attorney, you stop by a school and you drop in and you're a presence there. So you know what, all those kids, they know an attorney and they see that. And they have somebody that if something happens, they answer a question. I can't tell you how many times I walk into a classroom to talk to little kids and they start asking questions about things that are going on in their life because they don't have that access. It shouldn't be hard with the numbers of attorneys we have to have access. What about if we took the approach they took back in the day? And what about if we really gave back? And I don't mean giving back every minute of your life. I mean, what about if once a month you took a school and you were a presence in that school, even if it was one day, you volunteer. You introduce yourself to the kids. You get to know them just like you want the police to know the kids in the community. We should know each other too. We should know what our resources are. It's impossible for me to use a resource that I'm just really not familiar with.
Yeah, and I agree with you so much there, because what I've seen is we become an environment that's pretty selfish for the most part. You think of all the people that had sacrificed just so we could vote and I mean, gave up their lives. But we won't do that. And then even to go and spend time in schools to do something volunteer, where we're not getting paid, I think we could do a lot better than that as just the community in general. It never ceases to amaze me how you'll ask somebody to do something that, and is a charge, to everything. And yes, I think we have to, people have a livelihood, but, you got to give back. Just like you give your church 10%, you need to be giving more than 10% of your money. You got to give that in your time, in your commitment, your devotion, because I think all of us have a charge to make that happen.
But I think it's you can do it for even the most selfish reasons. If you want to see your kids do better, then, like, if we're being honest, when a police stops your kid, he doesn't know the difference between your kid and any other kid. It's just another black kid. So until you ensure that we are all safe, you can't ensure yours is safe. If you want your child to be in a situation where they're around productive people that are making productive decisions, then you have to make sure your team is strong and the people that you surround them with are strong. The same goes for our community. If we want to get to a point where this is something we reflect back on and get to say back in the day, then we have to make each other strong. And that means you go in and you have the conversation. And no, it doesn't mean you do everything in the world for free, but that time you give back, that is. The time you talk to the kids so they know somebody when mama's going through something, that is. They have to go to school. They have to be there. We need to know each other and what resources we have.
But more than just the kids, because a lot of times kids, I don't know, I can't imagine a 5-year-old, hey mom, I met this lawyer today, you should call her. I think that it's more about reaching the adults, the people who actually do have the problems that need to be addressed. And I think it is like a one-by-one thing. I think that, it's not always, some things are very, very simple. It's a question and an answer. It takes no time from a lawyer to answer a question, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5 if it's a little bit more complicated. But you can at least give them some general guidance. I don't think that is a burden in any way. And I think it's more than just, I'm black, more than just the black community. I think it's the community as a whole. I think that there are pitfalls associated with everybody's encounter with the justice system. And to the extent that we can empower people with information so that they're not falling victim to just the randomness of some of the judges, I think that's something that lawyers should do. I think that there are a lot of lawyers that do that. There are a lot, but there's still so many people that need help. And that's why I said Houston Lawyers Association or different organizations that are geared for NAACP, because they're geared toward that. They can answer those questions or at least point you in the right direction. And if you don't know anybody, ask around. Do you know a lawyer? Somebody, if you don't know a lawyer personally, somebody that you know has to know a lawyer.
There's a card that was put out. I've seen it, and I don't remember what all it says, but sort of basic instructions if you are stopped.
Right.
What were the things on
I
there?
think our public defender's office put that out. They have a thing, where to call and all of that. I think they have a thing that they hand out.
And they're everywhere. You can
stuff.
even Google it. You can Google it, especially in Texas.
What would it, I know it's understand you have the right to remain silent.
Right.
If you and a lot of people just start talking, and it's the things that they say get them in trouble. I always use the thing of, look, be courteous, be respectful. If an officer is asking you for permission to do something, that means he probably doesn't have the right to just do it on his own. So respectfully decline. But there was some other basic stuff that
You need to tape every police encounter that you have.
yeah, to the extent I think that's a new thing.
The minute that the officer pulls you over, you need to make sure you don't keep driving. You slow down, you hit the button on your phone. Most phones are programmed to, if you hit the home button twice, it goes and records. You don't have to stand there and say, oh my gosh, I'm recording you. That's really stupid. You just put your phone down and let it record the entire transaction. It might go good, but in case it goes bad and somebody's lying on you, you have proof to support what you say. And it's one of those things, you let it run and you never let them know that it's going on, but you tape it. When an officer stops you, you're not going to talk yourself out of the situation. You're only going to talk yourself into trouble.
Into a situation.
You have to remain silent and exercise that right. Officer, why am I being detained? And he may give you an answer, he may not. You remain calm, polite, respectful. You answer the questions like, my name is. Anything else? No, you don't answer those questions. Exercise your right to remain silent.
Even if you're, and you need to stress that, even if you're innocent, don't say anything, because it's amazing what they'll take and try to make something out of it. Let's try and see if the phone is working again. Let's see if the phone, if they've got it working. Caller?
Hello?
Hello? Thank you for calling.
Hi, I had a question for like millennials. what do you say to the millennials who've just given up on the process?
I tell them they're the problem. If I'm being honest, like I understand the process. It looks like it's a bit much, but the millennials have a lot of power. They can galvanize people through social media. If y'all all came out and voted, you wouldn't have to be tired of the process. You would change the process. You have the power in your hands to change so much, so you give up without making them fight you. Y'all are a force to be reckoned with, but y'all give all y'all power away. People discount millennials because they don't have to appeal to your issues. They don't have to make issues that you really care about. They can wipe your vote out because they know that you guys won't exercise it. I understand you're frustrated, but are you going to continue to be frustrated? Or are you going to make them do what they need to do in order to get your vote? Right now, they don't need to do anything because you won't show up. You are missing your opportunity to make the mark. And I understand that looking at everything, it can be a bit messy. But why don't y'all do like y'all do for everything else? Take it over, make it something new, something that's your own, that goes along the guidelines that y'all set up. You have the numbers. And by just giving up on the process, you don't take it over. You just make sure that it continues to be exactly what frustrates you.
Or worse.
The way and it's interesting. Thank you, caller, for that question. And I say that because I was just doing voter registration just last Sunday. And the people that literally told me that they did not want to register was the millennials. And they said they didn't want to be a part of the process. They didn't want to be involved. And I said, well, you're going to be involved whether you want to be involved or not. The question is, do you want to have input who makes those decisions for you, the laws that you have to comply with, the judges you have to face? Do you want to make that decision, or do you want someone else to make that decision for you? Because whether you like it or not, the reality is that you're going to be part of that system because you're going to be under somebody's control and leadership. So, you can you sit on the sidelines and let everybody else make the decisions for your life, or you can be inside those decisions and make those decisions for yourself.
I want them to do more than just make the decisions for
I agree
themselves.
with you.
I want them, the millennials have the power because of the way that they can mobilize people via
Not only
social.
the power, they're so innovative. They have something that's so unique.
And they can mobilize a base that like no other. Y'all get people out like no other. I'm not looking for the millennials to come out and give a voice or a vote to a particular candidate. What I'm looking at the millennials for is, because you have this power it's amazing to me. I want you to take it over. I want you to come up and you produce a vote that's so powerful that at the next election, or when that politician gets in office, you have a platform that you says, we'll vote you in, we voted you in, we will vote you out. What are you going to do to address our issues? But we can't get your issues addressed if you don't vote, because if you don't vote, you don't matter. And I want you to matter because you have the potential to take it all over. And I would like
to also
that.
start.
the world.
I mean, number one, you cannot afford to sit elections out. You can't afford not to participate, and they can also start producing your own candidates. I mean, Joe Biden, he's vice president now and he's old, but he was, when he ran for the Senate and won the Senate seat, I think he was like 29 years old. So, I mean, you can, millennials now, they have the power. When you look at the average congressional district, you don't have to have a whole lot of votes to win a seat in Congress. It's getting people out to vote. And I mean, think about it. If only 35% of the people voted in the last election, every member of Congress that's in Harris County was up for re-election. Every member of Congress is always up for election every 2 years. So I mean, the House members. If millennials were to get together and say, you know what, we're tired of the people who are representing us, and we're going to put one of our people there, they can do that. I mean, you're talking about 40,000 votes or 50,000 votes to win a seat. So, and it varies from city to city. Some places, 17,000 votes will win a seat. So, if you don't like the system, you don't sit back and say, well, I'll just let them do what they're going to do to me. No, you say, I'm going to get in and change it. And, one of the things that I've watched over the last year or so, all the protest rallies we have with Black Lives Matter. And please take this the right way. I am saying nothing disparaging about the movement of Black Lives Matter. But I wonder how many of those folks out there marching are registered to vote and how many will show up at the polls. If we had everyone who protests for Black Lives Matter to actually make Black Lives Matter by registering to vote and going out to vote, it would make a difference.
Yeah, you know what? Going back to just, I want to say, mobilizing the base, going back to protesting. I look at that with the judges, and I remember Wilbin out of Fort Bend talked about how you have so often, and we know the reality is, after these elections are over, you're appointing people political favors for helping out with your campaign. And sometimes they appoint people that has never even walked into a courtroom before because they're a lawyer or payback. And then those are the people that are making decisions that's going to impact the rest of our lives, or not the rest of our, or can impact the rest of our life if they go to prison. Not just go to prison, but if they're convicted in any way. And I think we got to go back to those activism days, that when that does happen, that we do go protest, we do go sit-ins, that we make sure that because it's hurting our kids, it's hurting our communities so much, what judges are doing, that we got to go back to even just protesting, being there and being out front. And that's when you say that the social media, the millennials, what they can bring to the table, what all of us can bring to the table is make it going back to the days where we marched, where we protested. And I say that because I remember going where they, in D.C., when they had the Martin Luther King, I think it was the Martin Luther King Monument or something like that.
Man March?
No, it was, I think it was they were celebrating the monument. And I remember standing out there in the cold, and I started thinking about history of when people would stand in the cold, or the bus boycott, where over a year people did not take that bus simply because they were trying to make it sure that we had rights. And it was even I can't remember what I know it was over a year. And I think today in our today's climate, if we told people that we wanted to protest something, oh, I don't know about you, I'm getting on the bus, I'm going to work, you know, we don't have that sense of community that we had before. And I think we got to go back to that.
The other part of it is, I don't know that those things are as effective as they were back then.
They can be.
But we have other mechanisms. Voting is more, look, if you stand out and you march on the governor's office for 6 months straight, he doesn't care, because he knows you didn't vote to put him there, and you're not going to vote to get him out. But if you vote, you can control who sits in the governor's office. There was a Houston Chronicle story that came out June of this year that talked about Governor Abbott. And the Texas governor just got elected in 2014, started serving in 2016. And the headline was, Greg Abbott's appointments raised some eyebrows. Texas governor largely taps white men and big donors with first 460 appointees. Looking at the people who helped him get into office and gave the money. Money is a big thing, but if you got a lot of votes, you can control what people do. They look at who is voting, and if you're voting in a large block in large numbers on certain issues, those issues automatically become important to them, because every politician's number one job is to be reelected. You look at the judges. Since he's been in office, Governor Abbott has appointed 13 judges. Not one of them been black. And I don't think Judge Greg Abbott is racist at all. I remember when he was a district court judge. I don't think he's racist at all. But he's looking at who's putting me in office. Those are the people I'm beholden to. And I'm saying, if we get these folks out here who are marching to start voting, registering and voting, you don't have to march now.
Yeah, and you tell them that if they don't vote, you know, if they don't put people in that look like us, a rainbow of people, we're going to make sure we vote you out of there. Then you'll start getting some traction. That, because at the end of the day, I think it is, as everybody said at the table, there's power in voting, and people actually pay attention to the voting blocks. Right now, to think of Donald Trump, why is he catering to the black voters right now? Because statistics show that African Americans are the most loyal group of set of voters that are out there. They're going to go vote for the most part. We can do a lot better in a lot of places, but you can believe that they're going to go out and vote. And that's the reason that he's catering to them right now, catering to us right now. But we got to use that power that we got with that vote and do something constructive with it to get the right people in these places.
And I think another thing that we could also, those that have the benefit of having at least a modest amount of wealth, put your money behind candidates. I think
Absolutely.
that lawyers, but not just lawyers, you have doctors, you have all kinds of people who have money but don't invest that into the political system. And then, I mean, there are people who are investing in the political system, and most of them don't look like us.
Yeah,
Well,
and
but
I
you don't
think
have to
we
have a lot of
have
money.
to give.
You don't.
Yeah,
But
I mean, you
power
look at,
and
you look
numbers.
At, you look
don't
at,
have to have a lot.
Bernie Sanders' campaign, and I was not a Bernie supporter, but you look at the millions of dollars he raised, and I think he said the average was like $19 or something like that. It was some small amount. So, you know, $5, $10. Every politician, they're gonna look at where's the money coming from. They're gonna look at their list of donors, who gave money to me, where did that money come from, and where did the votes come from. And if you're giving money and you're voting, or either of those two, they're going to pay attention to what your thoughts are. They're going to be concerned about your concerns. If you're not voting and you're not giving them money, they're not going to be concerned about your concerns. It'd be nice to think that politicians are going to just do the right thing, do what's in the best interest of the country. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. That's not how politics works. Their number one job is to be reelected. So they're looking at what are the concerns of the people who voted for me, because they're going to vote for me again. The people who didn't vote for me, frankly, my dear, they don't care about what your concerns are.
Yeah, and I think this is great. You know, just kind of talking the issues. Anybody that's sitting out there now that, for whatever reason, you know, we don't have a lot of time, but if you're someone that just not sold on voting, and we would love to hear from you, you know, to address it, to see what those concerns are, to see, you know, what's behind it, because, you know, a lot of times we are misinformed. We don't understand the power we have a lot of times. And I think when you ask those questions, you'll find out that, hey, you may have a little bit more power than you would otherwise think that you had.
I don't think it's even always about, you know, the power. I don't have enough power in just my vote. But I know for me personally, it was, I don't endorse either one of the candidates. I don't stand behind what they're saying. And I know that my ancestors, they died for my right to vote, but they died for just that, my right to vote. And I can go vote, but that doesn't mean that I'm just going to put my name behind anybody because somebody died for it. I'm just not going to be that one.
But the problem there is,
I agree.
When you elect not to vote,
You're voting.
You're casting a vote.
There you go.
And
You're silent.
there is no one that you're going to agree with 100% of the time. I don't agree with myself 100% of the time because I changed my mind. But the bottom line is you line up, with every election, you line up who are the folks who their views are most in line with mine and compare the two. And every election that I've ever voted in, it's always the choice of the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
This time is a little bit more glaring because, well, I mean, there are two candidates, and I mean, well, Trump. I mean, I just don't. I can't even understand. I can't even fathom considering voting for Donald Trump because
He scares me.
I mean, look. Anytime someone says behind every sentence, they're saying, "Believe me, believe me," and I think it's important to ask people, how are you going to do the things that you say you're going to do? I can come out and say, I'm running for president, and if you elect me, I'm going to make sure everyone gets a Bentley in their garage in my first 30 days of office. Believe me. No. How are you going to get me that Bentley? And that's what we have to do. Tell me specifically what your policies are and tell me how you're going to actually get that done. And when you start asking folks to give you the specifics of what they're going to do and how they're going to get it done, all at once, it starts to get a little bit thin. because they can't come up with a way to deliver on the promises that they're making.
Yeah, and I even just to just add a little bit more to that. This year, I'm just startled with all of the people and how the polls are with the president. I don't, that I didn't want to. That wasn't going to be our little topic today. I want to make sure we talk about voting. But the thing that I think as a community we got to be scared of is, being so dedicated to a party that somebody's just not good, and you're more concerned with party loyalty than the people. So that's one thing that I think has got me pretty much the most bummed out. It's just to see all these people rallying around somebody just to stay aligned with the party, knowing that that person is detrimental to the community and even to their families, and that I can't even respect. When somebody says that they're voting that way, I just kind of walk. I don't even want to hear it because I just can't see any justification when you got somebody so incompetent. But to not go there, we're about to wrap up. Anybody want to have any parting words? Any words of wisdom out there, or just something thought-provoking? 30 seconds, if that.
At the end of the day, we need to vote. If not for you, do it for your children. If you don't have children, do it for your future children. Because while you might be like me and not really sure about Hillary Clinton, it's better than Trump.
Yeah, and not just that, even our justices, I think about the importance of, or even our DA. You got a DA that not too long ago, I guess maybe a year or two, where the girl that she got raped and she had a breakdown and she didn't want to testify, and they put her in jail to make her stay around to testify. She gets beat up and abused, and our DA gets on makes a video defending it, never apologizing to the girl, but defending the fact that they got the killer even at her expense. So we got to get rid of people like that. And even to the point that she says, I'm for police. No, I'm for the police. Yes, we want them to be for the police, but for the police that's doing the right thing, as T.I. will say it's also often. T.I., okay.
I say in parting, vote and videotape. Every time you see a stop, if it's not you, videotape what's going on. Because unfortunately, a lot of things that we've seen, had not been for some innocent bystander videotaping, no one would have believed it.
T.I., we'll let you have the closing words.
I think it's just imperative. We're at a point where everybody is so disgusted about the way things are. We live in our community. We are devastated on a daily basis by the news we see. So it comes down to it. On November the 8th, are you going to do something? Or are you going to accept it? Because voting, you just accepted it.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope we've said something to enlighten you. Take care and Godspeed.